And joining us now, David Eaves, open government advocate and a fellow at the Center for the Study of Democracy at Queen's University. Hi, David. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, open government seems to make sense on the face of it, but when you refer to it in its proper sense, what are you referring to?
Well, I think open government is something that people are always striving for and has kind of evolved over the years. Now, more recently, the notion of open government has been kind of highly influenced by stuff that has come out of the technology sector, so the innovation of open source software. And it's really kind of refocusing what people think is possible around disclosure and transparency.
Okay, I've heard three terms, and I want you to help us with all three ones.
Absolutely.
Open government is one, government 2.0 is the second one, and e-government is the third. Let's go through this. You've told us what open government is and the philosophy behind that. Government 2.0 is different how?
Well, actually, if you don't mind, I actually prefer to start with e-government because I actually think it precedes that.
Okay.
E-government was kind of almost Web 1.0. It was, we suddenly discovered that there was this thing called the internet and that people were using it and that, frankly, government should maybe be there. And so the notion behind e-government was, how do we get the government online in some sense so that it can interact with citizens and even interact within itself? Government 2.0 is kind of the next generation of that. It's kind of thinking, well, how does that evolve and how does that transform? And on the internet, you've seen a whole bunch of innovations on how the internet is used and how people use the web. And so people are beginning to think, well, what's that mean for government? It's beginning to change how all sorts of industries work. Why isn't it changing government more?
And, okay, but specifically government 2.0, give me an example. How, what might that involve?
So one of the two examples that are predominant for me is the first is if you think of an application like Facebook. So most people think of Facebook and they think of something that's kind of fun. You do it to engage friends. And it's more than that, though. It's a way to connect with people. And on Facebook, when you have a page, you might fill in what your favorite movies are or your favorite books are. And a lot of people don't know that if you put in The Princess Bride, for example, which is a movie that everybody should have as a favorite movie, and you click on it, you see everybody in your network who's chosen that book too. So imagine if you had a Facebook within government, where someone was able to list all of the areas of knowledge they happen to have. That way, if I suddenly wanted to find someone with a unique set of skill sets, I could search for it, and I could instantaneously find that person. And it was almost guaranteed that there's someone, I mean, the 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 people who work for government, there's someone who's going to be in there who has that skill set, and they're the person I need to talk to.
Would it necessarily follow, then, that government 2.0 requires a lot more involvement out of its citizens than, say, whatever might have been expected 25 years ago?
Well, I think there's two pieces to that. There's an internal piece, which is one actually I'm incredibly interested in, which I'm not sure requires a lot of involvement on citizens. It requires a lot of involvement by government. And one I think is really interesting is this is actually not a technology issue. This is a struggle over what the future of work in government looks like. And just like come back into the Facebook example, a lot of the technology that made Facebook possible it didn't suddenly appear in the year 2000, and so this was technically doable. It had been around for a long time. What had happened was you had a generation of people who'd grown up on the internet, who had grown up with the culture of the internet, who understood how this technology worked, and so they built new applications that actually didn't use technology that was necessarily all that new. And the same thing's going on in government. You have a generation, both of older and younger people, who have been starting to use this technology, and they're beginning to rethink what does it mean to work, and what is the model of government that we want. Okay,
let me just make sure I got the philosophy and the understanding behind all this. The idea of government as platform or network ushers in this era of engaged citizenry, more participatory democracy, a more involved electorate, and therefore a more perfect form of democracy than anything we have today. Is that the gist of it at the end of the day?
I mean, that is certainly the kind of the bigger potential. I think there's an internal piece, which is actually just getting government to work better internally, but there is this other opportunity, this bigger opportunity of engaging citizens in some new ways.
Okay, so when you say getting government to work better, do you mean just renewing my driver's license more efficiently and effectively?
Yeah, and also doing more with less. I mean, this example I used earlier with Facebook, where we're being able to find people in government. Government's it's an enormous organization, and people hire consultants all of the time because that consultant has some sort of expertise that need. If you could suddenly find those expertise within government, you could do more with less.
What are the barriers at the moment to people using the government's available data? Because you can go on, every ministry's got websites, and there's Government of Ontario has a website. You can go on there and find out a ton of information already. So what's the big obstacle right now?
So there's two barriers right now. I'm really glad you brought this up because it's part of this is one of the things I really feel passionate about. I've been working with the City of Vancouver, working with the Mayor's office, and we launched an open data portal. And there's two pieces here. The first is often the information is available in forms that really aren't that compelling. So they're available in a PDF file. where you can't even copy and paste the text out.
Right.
That means you can't open it up in Word, or you can't open it up in a document and search it for terms that you need to find or want to find. So you've got to read the entire 50 or 100 or who knows how long the document might be in order to get.
Why do they do that? Why do they do that?
You know, I think that there's not actually something malicious going on here. It's just that before the internet, disclosure meant we printed it out and we gave it to you, and that's what it looked like. And for a lot of people when the internet came along, they didn't actually understand the power that the internet offers us. And so they said, well, let's do the same thing online. So we're gonna print it out and we're gonna scan it into a PDF, and now you are able to go and print it out yourself. And they didn't think about that functionality of being able to search. The other big challenge is, so the first here is we need better formats.
Okay.
And so we want to be able to download data in bulk so that we can look at everything.
In the format
format that is useful as what we call machine readable, so that your machine being your computer can read it, and so you can play with it and understand and analyze it.
Got it.
The second is, right now a lot of this data is scattered all over the government. So a project actually I'm just launching today called data.dotgc.ca.
Data.
Yes, but the dot is actually a DOT because
out.
I'm not allowed to own a real .gc.ca website.
And GC is Government of Canada?
Yeah.
Okay.
And only they're allowed to own a formal .gc.ca website. Okay. And what we're doing is we're crowdsourcing the location of all of the data sets that are open already in Canada and bringing them into a single location where you can search for just the data sets. And then the other cute little thing we're doing is we're mapping which ministries are sharing how many data sets, so you can look at a chart and you can say, oh, well, who's sharing and who's not sharing.
And the value of having this information at the end of the day is what?
Well, there's all sorts of people who can do interesting things with this information, and some of it's already been done. So one of the things that I found quite compelling is a Google Earth map that actually Environment Canada created, which shows you many of the industrial facilities in the country, where they're located in the country, and what they're emitting. In the city of Vancouver, we launched this open data portal, and already we're beginning to see some of the benefits coming out of that. So for example, a local architecture firm that has a nonprofit arm wrote a report about the future of Vancouver. And to help them do that, they actually downloaded a number of the data sets to help them analyze where things were located in the city and what would happen if sea levels rose, what would be negatively impacted. So now all of a sudden the city benefits from this extra analysis because it put this data out there.
Gotcha, okay. I've seen this term, mashing up data. What does that mean?
So mashing up data is when you take a data set, maybe one the government has, and you take another data set, could be the government or could be from somewhere else, and you put them together to show some interesting correlation or some interesting view of the country. So you might take, for example, age, province data, and obesity, and show kind of on a very detailed level where people tend to be living who are more obese, because that might shed some light on what are the population sets that are most at risk, but also are there certain governments that are maybe not tackling this issue as well, or are there certain communities that are particularly at risk that are maybe being ignored at the moment?
Now I can see special interest groups doing this, but do average citizens do this too?
So I think it depends on what you call average citizen. The short answer is yes. Not everybody is going to, but the number of people who have quirky little passions or strong feelings about something are almost, there's 30 million of us, and there's millions and millions of those people out there. And who knows? The great thing is we don't know what's possible. If we put it out there, who knows what magic might emerge?
Okay, let me follow up. People are designing computer programs that use government data to help other citizens.
That's correct.
For example, what?
So the big example at the moment coming out of Vancouver is this wonderful story called Van Trash, where I was beginning to work with the mayor's office to talk about what open data would mean, and I wrote this example of saying, well, garbage day in Vancouver, it changes every month because it always slides with the holiday, with the monthly holiday. So I said, it would be really nice then, rather than just getting a paper version of your calendar, if we had a website where if you went to it, showed you all the garbage zones in the city. You just clicked on the zone in which you lived, and right away it gave you the calendar. You could download it into your iPhone or your BlackBerry or onto your computer, or you could even set up an email reminder, and it would email you the day before garbage day every time. And lo and behold, these two fantastic coders, Luke Kloss and Kevin Jones, they emailed me like 3 weeks later, and they said, hey, Dave, we read your blog. We thought the idea was great. We've made it.
And they did it.
And they did it. And if you go to vantrash.ca now, you will see this cute little service that they're now offering the city.
The highest ranking civil servant in Ottawa is the clerk of the Privy Council. The clerk of the Privy Council now tweets.
Correct.
This is pretty amazing. And he set up a wiki, apparently, to get input from the public service on what it needs to do to renew itself or to share some good ideas. How much of open government means changing the way government works internally? Never mind us putting it to them, but them kind of coming up with it from bottom up.
This is what I think is the first real battle. that when we talk about open government, I'm interested in government that's open to its citizens, engaged in citizens. I'm also interested in a government that's actually open internally. One of the powerful things about all these new kind of network tools like Twitter, like Facebook, like what's called GCpedia, which is like a Wikipedia inside the public service, is that they allow people to self-organize and share critical pieces of information with one another. Right now, if you're working somewhere in the health department and you have some particular knowledge or a policy that you need advice on, you've got to go locate all of the people whose files overlap with your own. And that can take months and months just to find the people and also to get permissions to talk to them. Now with GCpedia, you can simply put your policy, if you had the permission, you could put the policy up online and say, anybody within the government who has thoughts on this, whose own file overlaps with this, I'd love to hear what you think. Here's the document, add your edits or send me an email.
Well, that's interesting. You said anybody who has permission. So this would be something that would be only available to people who work in the public service?
So I actually say that for two reasons. The first is, yes, only available at the moment for people who are in the public service. But even more importantly, one of the interesting things that has started to happen is that with GCpedia in place and more people starting to get online and using it, is some managers are actually not happy with their employees working across departments with other people and are ordering people they're not allowed on GCpedia.
Now see, this would seem to defeat the purpose of the whole thing, right?
Yes.
So how do you get, they call it the bureaucracy for a reason. How do you get them out of that bureaucratic mindset?
Well, this is why I say this actually isn't about the technology. This is about culture. And it's about kind of a struggle between a vision of the public service that is highly centralized and top-down, and one that is still accountable, but offers people more opportunity to kind of move around and help one another out, which is something they all do. I think if you talk to most public service today, they actually live this terrible double life, where they're told they live in this rigid hierarchy and they, the lines of control are all up and down. But actually, a lot of them spend a huge amount of time just trying to find one another and help each other out on all these complex overlapping files, but they're kind of told that's not really what you're supposed to be doing. So they live this double life, and I think this technology surfaces that conflict and I think offers us a really interesting way out of it.
In which case, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the way things work on open government elsewhere in the world, but can you tell us, relatively speaking, how well we're doing here?
So let's look at the public-facing side. So open data, I don't want to claim by any stretch that this is the be-all, end-all of open government, but I do think it's an incredibly important piece. If you look at what the Privacy Commissioner wrote yesterday, the access information, how it's broken, I think there was something like 10 ministries that had failing grades. People today live in an era where the average Google search is something like 0.3 seconds. And that's how quickly that's how quickly they expect to get information. And now all of a sudden you have a government where if you want to know about something, it takes 6, 7, 8, 9 months. There's this wonderful phrase on the internet that the internet treats censorship like a failure and it roots around it. And I have a real concern that people, especially young people, look at government and at the pace that it moves, and they see it either as censorship or just simply as broken, and they're going to route around it. So the open data sets are a way to get information to the public more quickly and allows them to analyze and them to look at it in really interesting ways.
But as you point out, this is not a technology story. It's still, at the end of the day, a people/culture story. Yeah. And we saw stories all over the newspapers today, and on the news, of course, where the Information Commissioner in Ottawa was saying that there are many departments in this government that get a D or an F for their failure to be open and accessible to people. So this is the current government in Ottawa has come under criticism for being too secretive and too tight with information. Question, can any of what you're talking about happen if the political leadership to make it happen isn't there?
Yeah, that I think is a fantastic question. I think if the political leadership is not there, it probably won't happen. When you look at the places where progress is moving forward the fastest, so you look at the United States, for example, one of the first gestures that Barack Obama said is he turned around and he issued a diktat to all of the departments, and he said, you need, within 90 days, to start releasing data sets and getting raw data feeds of kind of what we're doing into public hands.
We had a similar order like that come out of Ottawa?
No, never. And in the UK, the same thing. Tim Berners-Lee got recruited, the inventor of the web got recruited by the Prime Minister, and literally went around to all the departments, and the kind of his star power meant that they would talk to him, and now the British have something like close to 3,500 data sets available online that you can download and play with.
Well, David, I thank you for getting the discussion started. We're going to cross the studio and continue our discussion with three folks in Washington who will have more to say about how well the Obama administration is doing on all of this. So join me, if you would, on the other side.